Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. I think many people hear those words and automatically think of the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I see several heads nodding. These words have echoed through marches and protests and movements for freedom around the world. In fact, I imagine a majority of folks you asked where that quote came from, they would say Dr. King and not the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. Dr. King invoked these words in his 1967 message, "Where do we go from here?" He said that we must honestly face the fact that the movement must address itself to the question of restructuring the whole of American society. He went on to call us to live what he named a divine dissatisfaction. Don't you love that? A divine dissatisfaction. A holy restlessness that refuses to make peace with injustice. But as we heard today, these words didn't begin with Dr. King. No, they were first uttered nearly 2,800 years ago by a fig farmer or farm owner named Amos. And Alvaro wants you to remember that his work was with figs because you know how much Alvaro loves figs, so keep that in mind. Kindred spirits there. Now, Amos was from a small village in the southern kingdom of Judah. And he wasn't a priest or a prophet by trade. He wasn't trained in rhetoric or ritual. He was just a man who felt an extraordinary call from God, a call that he could not resist. Maybe you've felt that call before yourself. And he felt this call from God to travel to the north, to the prosperous kingdom of Israel, to speak the hard truth to those who were in power. Now, Israel at the time was booming. Things were really good. Trade routes were strong. Crops were plentiful. And the wealth was concentrated in the hands of a very few. The elites were living extremely well, feasting, decorating, expanding their estates, while the poor and working class were crushed under taxes and labor. The farmers had to work multiple jobs and service multiple crops just to pay these high taxes, crops that they couldn't even really use, ones that were used for wine and other exports. And they did this so that they could not only pay the high taxes, but also the debts that they were incurring just to make ends meet. Sounds familiar, right? Yeah. And yet, the people in power and the upper class, they wanted more and more and more. And the divide between the rich and the poor grew wider by the day. And religion was thriving. Festivals were beautiful. Worship was elaborate. Offerings were abundant. The priests led the sacred rituals every Sabbath. And then, the rest of the week, the pious became the punishers, exploiting their neighbors and their workers and ignoring the cries of the poor. And Amos called them out. Amos was speaking truth to power with a courageous voice that can only be carried by the divine, telling them that this is not what God desires. He warned them, hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. Because a community that celebrates ritual but neglects justice has missed the point entirely. You must have both. So if you read this book in its entirety, I don't know if anyone has. You don't have to. Oh, I've got a few hands. Good. I see one of our ordained ministers back there has, which is great. Good. We'll let the seminary professors know. But Amos, it's not a pretty book to read, right? His words are pretty harsh throughout it. It's short. It's only 9 chapters. And he warns that if the people don't change, then the very ground beneath them will shake. A prophecy for a different day. The book of Amos confronts us, as scholar Mark Hamilton writes, with the harsh reality of a world where human injustice reigns, where human beings become commodities and physical objects become gods. And yet, what we don't hear in today's passage, but what we hear at the very end of this book, is a flicker of hope that breaks through. The mountains shall drip sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it. I will restore the fortunes of my people. Because God's vision isn't about punishment, it's about restoration. So if we're honest with ourselves, after hearing these words from Amos and learning a little bit more about the context, right? That's always important, of where and when and who he was saying these to, I think that we know too well the world that Amos finds himself in, don't we? According to research from the Poor People's Campaign, around 140 million people in our country are poor or low income. 140 million of us face economic hardships, while billionaires hoard resources at levels that are unimaginable 10 years ago or a generation ago. We see people literally wailing in the streets, wailing online. We hear them crying out. We are crying out. This week alone, I saw videos of ICE agents ripping a preschool teacher from her classroom and forcefully dragging her outside of the school. And my heart doesn't only break for her and her colleagues, but for those children, those young children, and the trauma that this inflicted onto them as well. And I saw a man who began having a seizure while he was being detained. And no one stopped to adjust to care for him in any sort of way. And the people were crying on the streets for them to stop and pay attention to this person who was hurting and in distress. Every day, people are being ripped from their homes and their communities. People are struggling to feed their families. People are going without food, while workers are also going unpaid, our civil servants. And yet we continue to pour billions of dollars into weapons and walls. And let's be clear about what that means. I could be off. I did a little research. Correct me after the service if I'm wrong. But we know air traffic controllers, TSA agents, some law enforcement officers are still going to work without pay. Active duty military and National Guard members must keep serving, but their paychecks have stopped. Medical staff in federal hospitals, judicial clerks, probation officers are often ordered to work as essential workers. Federal contractors, people who sometimes clean the buildings and cook the food and handle maintenance, might not even get back pay at all. And meanwhile, members of Congress continue to receive their full paychecks. Federal judges continue to be paid. ICE agents continued to be funded and hired, even as our essential services grind to a halt. So while those who serve and protect and are asked to sacrifice are going unpaid, the systems and the people in power keep rewarding themselves. And here we are on Veterans Day weekend, when we are called to honor those who serve, and we are doing anything but when our nation withholds pay from them and their families. A society that sings hymns and holds its festivals and waves its flags while ignoring the cries of the people who actually hold the nation together is not the beloved community that we are called to build. And Amos's voice echoes once again. Seek good and not evil, that you may live. There are days, and this is one of them, when you wonder what your role is in this country and what your future is in it. I'm terrified at the moral apathy, the death of the heart, which is happening in my country. These people have deluded themselves for so long that they don't really think I'm human, and I base this on their conduct and not what they say. And this means that they have become in themselves moral monsters. Those words were shared in 1962 by James Baldwin at a town hall in New York when he was speaking to artists about integrity and how important their work, their voice, their visions were during the civil rights movement. What he said then could have been written this morning. The death of the heart. That is what Amos was trying to prevent. That is what Baldwin was warning those artists and us about. That's what happens when we stop feeling the pain of others and when faith becomes performance. Dr. King said that we must face the question of restructuring its society itself. And he was right. And that work begins in very small ways, one act at a time. I know that you may be wondering this morning, but what can I do? I'm here, I'm young, I'm old, I'm not equipped. What can I do? You may be feeling overwhelmed. Who isn't feeling overwhelmed these days, right? You may feel helpless. But please, I beg you, do not turn away. Do not turn away from the cries that are happening in our country, in our world, in our community, in our neighborhood, right here in our congregation. And this means different things for different people. Maybe it means turning off the news or getting off of social media so that you can breathe and think clearly. Taking that break does not mean that you don't want to be informed. It means you're also caring for your soul and for the souls of those around you as well. Maybe it means calling a friend who's struggling. Maybe it means volunteering one day a month with our Samaritan House meal service, or bringing one can of food next Sunday for our blessing box. There's a collection bin right out there in the narthex. Maybe it's writing one email, or showing up to one prayer vigil, or signing one petition. Or maybe it's as simple or as difficult as asking ourselves, what breaks my heart? What breaks my heart? Because God's heart is breaking too. And when we dare to move toward what breaks our hearts, then love finds another way to flow into our world. So if you are already doing the work, which I know that you are, keep going. Keep going. Do not fall into despair. Do not turn away. Do not become numb. As hard as it is, do not become numb. Stay awake, stay steady, and stay yourselves. God's love at work in the world. Because maybe the most radical thing that we can do in a world of moral monsters is to refuse to let our hearts be hardened. May it be so. Amen.